Welcome to the Past Bills Podcast, a place where we stitch up history with a side of humor. Join me, your host, Sam MD, in dissecting the past, exploring the wacky world of medicine across civilizations God knows how old, as we embark on this wild adventure through the bizarre and downright hilarious tales of medical practices never before told in a podcast. Each physician is a physician of one disease and of no more, and the whole country is full of physicians, for some profess themselves to be the physicians of the eyes, others of the head, others of the teeth. This is Herodotus, a Greek historian giving a seemingly satirical commentary on the land of the pharaohs and the Nile, Egypt. Because Egypt was known as the mother country of diseases, according to the Greek contemporary sources. Much has been said, written, and filmed about the exuberant lives and post-mortem festivities that the Egyptian kings enjoyed, so we'd now steer clear of that. We will not be going over the most efficient methods of desiccation for mummies, or why we could simply not pickle the pharaohs, or the use of baking soda by the embalmers, or even the standard approach to gutting the good old king. You'd already be expert in that. The culture of medicine that was practiced in Egypt is what I would like to elaborate on. Like we saw with the Sumerians and their tablets, the Egyptians had found the papyrus handy. Much of what we know of that time, some 3000 before the Common Era, we know through these scrolls and mummies, of course. Over the 19th and 20th centuries, the novel radiographic and biochemical studies offered an insight into the common maladies of the day. Parasitic infestations, trauma, infections, genetic disorders, these could all be studied in these well-preserved specimens. Different species of schistosoma were commonly found thanks to the Nile, leading to lifelong infestation with definite physical consequences. Dental health wasn't particularly great either, from the ubiquitous nature of sand particles as you would imagine. Tuberculosis, arthritis, metabolic syndromes were all ever present. So if anyone tells you, when we were young, we never knew disease, well, take them to your nearest science history museum. Now, as we have seen, the kinds of diseases that existed, or rather that were known to them, two major flavors of physicians were born: priest physicians and non-priest physicians. The priests were reserved for the upper class, while the non-priest healers served the commoners. As I mentioned earlier, they were all specialized to an extent, and many of them had multiple qualifications. Any mention of Egypt would be incomplete without the mention of Imhotep. I know I'm butchering the pronunciation, but that's what it is. Imhotep was perhaps widely regarded as the first physician ever. In fact, he was a lot of things at once: an architect, a minister, an astronomer, a scribe, a priest, and whatnot. I'm not sure what made him great, but you could imagine the scope of his personality from the fact that upon his death, the disease-stricken people from all over Egypt would flock to his temple seeking health. People would have sleepovers in the temple built over his grave for magical healing. Well, that is a concept that is more often associated with the Greeks. Imhotep's status can be rightly pictured by his later ascent to being the Egyptian god of medicine. Another important figure seen in the courts of Egyptian pharaohs we find is that of Imhotep, again butchering the pronunciation. Imhotep is often known as Iri. Before I explain his job and the importance that was associated with it, it should be mentioned that among the various organ systems of the human body, to Egyptians of utmost significance and importance was the gastrointestinal system, the GI. It was thought that the humans were vulnerable to disease and sickness as a result of the intestinal invasion by impurities, leading to the corruption of the normal homeostatic functions of the body. And among the many interventions that were practiced back then, one was enema. If you didn't know, it was in fact invented by the Egyptian god Thought, as the story goes. Enema was one way of purging the body or detoxing it. So was retching. So this practice of clearing your body of the toxins by cleaning your GI tract was very important back then. That is precisely why Reneshet or Eri had a prominent place among the courtiers and was given the title of the Shepherd of the Anus or the Keeper of the Royal Rectum. We could say that he was perhaps the first board-certified poop dog. I would prefer the title Keeper of the Royal Rectum over poop dog any day. Although the field was male-dominated back then, we know that women were physicians and surgeons. Women were trained in various medical and surgical skills. There were also teachers who taught OBGYN at medical institutions that were established like the House of Life, for example. But even our favorite queen Cleopatra was very well versed in medicine. A strict code of conduct was in place for all the practitioners on the lines of do not mock the blind and the dwarfs, do not sneer at the sick. I would argue, even today, if you follow such bare-bone versions of our tedious guidelines, we'd be quite empathetic. As hinted earlier, papyrus was used to document all that we now know. The record contains about 700 drugs, that's a marvelous number, including some that are straight out of some fairy tale like Thought's Feather, Heaven's Eye, and the other ordinary ingredients were like ox oil, honey, barley, ostrich eggs, dates and beans, ox liver, and herbs. These were fairly common for treating conditions ranging from wounds to arthritis to vitamin deficiencies. There is also some evidence of Egyptians experimenting with various modes of contraception, with one example being a vaginal suppository containing crocodile poop. I mean, where does one even find crocodile dung? So all this information that was decoded in the last 2 centuries, thanks to various Egyptologists, offers an excellent insight into the Egyptian practice of medicine. Although I'm inclined to offering a sort of muted caricature of all of it and of other ancient civilizations, I'm always positively surprised at the advancement each successive civilization had achieved. As the saying goes, on the shoulders of giants, be it wound management, be it orthopedic procedures, minor surgical procedures like circumcision, surgical instruments made of bronze, be it anesthesia in its most primitive form, like using opium, or be it anonymous scribes writing down the treatment guidelines in a precise and orderly fashion. This was the Egyptian practice of medicine. This was how developed their sciences were, particularly medicine. That was not 200 years ago, but a good 2,000 years before Christ. So that was the story of Egypt, and I hope you liked it. And hopefully you got to learn something new today. And that's a wrap on today's episode. So until next time, keep your leeches closed, your antibiotics closer, and your sense of humor closest. This is Sam MD, signing off from the Past Pills podcast and reminding you to wash your hands before history repeats itself. Be sure to leave a review wherever you get your podcast. It helps other people find the show. Stay historical, fam.